10 years. That's how long he kept the secret, even from his own wife. I only learned the truth when the bank called, just days after the funeral. What I heard didn't just leave me frozen in shock. It thrust me into a battle where my opponents would be those who shared my own blood. The money he'd hidden wasn't just a fortune. It was a test of everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and the man I'd loved for 42 years. My name is Margaret Whitford, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be standing in the rain, watching strangers lower my husband into the ground while my own children plotted against me. The funeral took place on a gray October morning in our small coastal town in Maine. The Atlantic wind whipped through the cemetery, carrying the salt spray that Richard had loved so much during our 42 years together. I stood between my son Daniel and daughter Clara, but the distance between us felt wider than the ocean itself. "Mother, we need to discuss the house," Daniel murmured as the minister spoke about eternal rest. His breath formed small clouds in the cold air. "This place is too big for you now." I kept my eyes on the casket, on the American flag draped over it, a tribute to Richard's service in the Navy decades ago. My fingers clutched the folded flag they'd given me moments earlier, its edges sharp against my palms. "Not here," I whispered. Clara shifted beside me, her designer heels sinking into the wet grass. "The real estate market is strong right now. We could get a good price, set you up somewhere. More manageable. More manageable. As if I were a problem to be solved, not their mother grieving the loss of her soulmate. The crowd was thin, a handful of Richard's colleagues from the Maritime Museum, some neighbors, a few people from the community center where I'd worked as director for 20 years before retiring. My children had insisted on a small, private service. Dad would have wanted it simple, they'd said, though Richard had been the most social man I'd ever known. After the burial, we gathered in the church basement for the reception. The fluorescent lights cast everything in a harsh, unforgiving glare. Daniel cornered me by the coffee urn, his face wearing that expression I'd seen too often lately, a mixture of impatience and false concern. "We've already spoken to Harold about the accounts." "No," he said, referring to our family lawyer. "It's best if Clara and I have access, just to help manage things. You shouldn't have to worry about finances at a time like this." "I've been managing our finances for 4 decades, I said quietly, setting down my untouched cup of coffee. "That was different. Dad was there to..." "To what? Make the decisions for me?" The sharpness in my voice surprised us both. Clara appeared at Daniel's elbow. Ever the diplomat. "We're just trying to help. Mother, you're going through so much." I looked at my children, really looked at them. When had they become these cold, calculating strangers? Daniel, with his software company in Boston, always checking his phone even during his father's funeral. Clara, with her perfect suburban life in Connecticut, her husband conveniently absent today, claiming a business emergency. Harold Davidson, our lawyer for the past 30 years, approached with an envelope in his weathered hands. His eyes held a kindness my children's lacked. "Margaret," he said softly, pressing the envelope into my palm, "there's something we need to discuss. Privately. Can you come to my office tomorrow?" Daniel reached for the envelope. "If this is about Dad's estate..." Harold's gentle demeanor hardened. "This is a matter between your mother and me. Daniel, attorney-client privilege." The room seemed to hold its breath. Daniel's jaw tightened, and Clara's perfectly painted lips pressed into a thin line. "We're her children," Clara said. "We have a right to..." "You have no rights here," Harold interrupted, his voice steady but firm. "Your mother is of sound mind and body. I'll thank you to remember that." The drive home was silent. Daniel and Clara followed me in their respective rental cars, like hunters stalking wounded prey. The house felt enormous and empty without Richard's presence. His coffee mug still sat on the kitchen counter where he'd left it 3 days ago, before the massive heart attack that stole him from me in mere minutes. "We'll stay the night," Clara announced, dropping her bag in the foyer as if she still lived here. "That's not necessary," I said, Don't be ridiculous. You shouldn't be alone. Daniel was already heading to the kitchen, probably to inventory the contents for the estate sale he was clearly planning. That night, I lay in our bed, my bed now, listening to my children moving through the house. They spoke in hushed tones, but I caught fragments. Power of attorney, assisted living, liquidate assets. They thought I was weak. They thought grief had broken me. They had no idea what Richard and I had built together, what we'd planned, what secrets he might have taken to his grave, or what he might have left behind. Harold's envelope lay hidden beneath my pillow, unopened. Tomorrow would bring revelations, I sensed, but tonight. I allowed myself to grieve not just for my husband, but for the children we'd raised who now circled like vultures, eager to pick apart the life we'd built. The rain had stopped, but the wind continued to howl off the Atlantic. Somewhere in that darkness lay answers, and perhaps, if I was strong enough, a chance to honor Richard's memory in ways my children couldn't imagine. They wanted to manage me. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The next morning, I slipped out of the house at 7:30 while Daniel and Clara were still asleep. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of dying leaves and distant wood smoke. I drove to Seaview Bank, the envelope from Harold burning in my purse. Inside the envelope had been a simple note. Margaret, Richard established something at Seaview 10 years ago. Ask for Patricia Morse, the branch manager. She's expecting you. Harold. The bank was a solid brick building that had anchored Main Street since 1892. Patricia Morse met me in the lobby, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and prematurely gray hair pulled into a neat bun. Mrs. Whitford, she said, taking my hands in both of hers. I'm so sorry for your loss. Richard was, well, he was one of a kind. She led me to a private office and closed the door. The blinds were already drawn. What your husband did here, Patricia began, settling behind her desk, was extraordinary and extremely unusual. She pulled out a thick folder. 10 years ago, Richard opened an account under the name Project Haven. He insisted on very specific conditions. My heart hammered against my ribs. What kind of conditions? First, absolute secrecy. Not even you were to know until... She paused delicately. Until his passing. Second, he made regular deposits, sometimes cash, sometimes transfers from various investment accounts he managed separately. And third, he left very specific instructions for what should happen to the funds. She slid a bank statement across the desk. I had to read the balance 3 times before my mind could process it. $19,437,212. That's impossible, I whispered. Oh, your husband was a very shrewd investor, Patricia said. But more than that, he had a vision. There's a letter. She handed me an envelope with my name written in Richard's careful script. My hands trembled as I opened it. My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And you're probably wondering why I kept this from you. The truth is, I started this the day you retired from the community center. You cried that night, thinking I was asleep. You said you felt useless, like your purpose was gone. I knew then what I had to do. Every overtime hour at the museum, every consulting job I took on the side, every lucky investment, it all went here, for 10 years. I built this for you, for us, for the community that gave us so much. The folder contains everything: architectural plans, feasibility studies, contractor estimates, a community health center with an attached affordable housing complex for seniors, your dream EM, the one you used to sketch on napkins during town meetings. You know what to do. You always have. Build something beautiful. Build something lasting. Build it despite anyone who tries to stop you. All my love, Richard. P.S. Trust Harold. Trust Patricia. Don't trust anyone who puts their comfort above your vision. I couldn't see through my tears. Patricia quietly pushed a box of tissues across the desk. He came in every month, she said softly. Always asked about you. Showed me pictures from your trips. He was so proud when you won that volunteer service award from the state. I unfolded the architectural plans with shaking hands. There it was, professionally drawn, engineered, and permitted. A 3-story community health center with a sliding scale payment system. Next to it, 48 affordable apartments designed for aging residents, gardens, a playground for visiting grandchildren. Everything I dreamed of but never thought possible. The land? I asked. He had several sites in mind, but wanted you to make the final choice. There's a notebook with his research. Patricia handed me another folder. Mrs. Whitford, I should warn you, a project of this scope won't go unnoticed. There are people in this town who won't want this kind of development. I thought of Daniel and Clara, asleep in my house, planning to ship me off to some facility. I thought of the town council, always so eager to approve another luxury hotel or upscale shopping center, while families struggled to afford basic health care. Let them try to stop me, I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. Patricia smiled. Richard said you'd say exactly that. There's one more thing. He set up a board of advisors, people he trusted. Their contact information is in the folder. They've been waiting for your call. I spent another hour going through the documents. Richard had thought of everything: environmental impact studies, traffic analyses, even a proposed partnership with the State University's medical school for rotating clinics. As I prepared to leave, Patricia stood. Your husband talked about you constantly. He said you were the strongest person he knew, but that you'd forgotten it somewhere along the way. He wanted to remind you. I clutched the folders to my chest. He kept this secret for 10 years. He kept this gift for 10 years, Patricia corrected. There's a difference. Outside, the morning sun had burned through the clouds. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Daniel and Clara, no doubt, wondering where I'd gone. Let them wonder. I sat in my car for a long moment, reading Richard's letter again, at the bottom, in smaller print. I noticed something I'd missed before. If our children give you trouble, and knowing them, they will, remember that blood doesn't always mean family. Family is the people who see your vision and help you build it. $19 million, enough to build something that would serve this community for generations. Enough to create Richard's final gift to the town he'd loved. Enough to show Daniel and Clara that their mother was anything but manageable. I started the car and headed home, ready for war. I knew I couldn't face Daniel and Clara yet, not with $19 million burning a hole in my consciousness. Instead, I drove to the modest office building where Dr. Helena Morris ran her nonprofit community health organization. Helena and I had worked together for years when I directed the community center. She was one of those rare people who combined brilliant medical knowledge with genuine compassion, a Harvard-trained physician who chose to serve fishing families and hotel workers instead of wealthy resort guests. Margaret! She rose from behind a desk cluttered with grant applications and medical journals. I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to the service yesterday. We had an emergency at the free clinic. Richard would have understood, I said, settling into a worn chair. Actually, he's the reason I'm here. Helena's eyebrows rose as I spread the architectural plans across her desk. I watched her expression shift from polite interest to genuine amazement as she absorbed the details. This is... she breathed, running her fingers over the clinical space specifications. Margaret, this is exactly what we need. Examination rooms, a dental suite, mental health counseling spaces, even a small pharmacy. And the housing component. Do you know how many of my elderly patients are living in substandard conditions? Richard knew, I said quietly. He paid attention. I told her about the money, about Richard's secret project. Helena listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making notes. You realize what you're up against, she asked when I finished. The town council has been in the pocket of developers for years, Victor Langley especially. He chairs the planning committee and owns half the commercial real estate downtown. He won't want affordable housing bringing down property values. I figured as much. Helena studied me over her reading glasses. And your children? They want to put me in a home and sell everything. Vultures, she said matter-of-factly. I see it all the time in my practice. adult children who view their parents as ADMs or inconveniences. She tapped the plans. But this could change everything. We need a team. She reached for her phone. James Kowalski is the best architect in the state for this kind of project. He designed the Veterans Housing Complex in Portland. And Sarah Blackwood, she's a wizard with permits and zoning, used to work for the state before she went private. Within an hour, Helena had arranged a meeting for the following day. We'll need more than just professionals, she warned. We'll need community support, the fishermen's union, the hotel workers, the teachers, all the people who can't afford to live where they work anymore. Richard left a list of advisors, I said, pulling out the notebook. Look at these names. Helena whistled softly. Captain Rodriguez from the fishing fleet, Maria Santos from the Hotel Workers Union, Reverend Jackson from the Baptist Church. Your husband was building a coalition. For 10 years, apparently. Smart man. Helena leaned back in her chair. But Margaret, I need you to understand something. The moment word gets out about this money, you'll have a target on your back. Not just from developers, from anyone who thinks they deserve a piece of it, including your children. I thought of Daniel's calculating eyes, Clara's grasping hands. They're already circling. Then we move fast, get the land secured before anyone can stop you. Helena pulled up a map on her computer. There's a perfect site, the old Garrison Shipyard property, 20 acres, waterfront access, near the bus line. The owner, Frank Garrison, has been trying to sell for years but won't deal with developers. His grandfather built ships there for the Navy. Richard has that circled in his notebook, I said, checking. With a note. Frank will understand. Helena smiled. Of course he did. Your husband thought of everything. Her expression grew serious. Margaret, I want to be clear. If we do this, I'm all in. The clinic will relocate there. I'll help oversee the medical components, whatever you need. But it's going to get ugly. These people don't like their power challenged. Neither do I said, surprising myself again with my firmness. Helena grinned. There's the Margaret I remember, the one who faced down the entire school board to get free lunch programs expanded. We spent the next 2 hours sketching out a preliminary timeline. Helena knew which community organizations to approach, which local politicians might be sympathetic, which journalists would cover the story fairly. One more thing, she said as I prepared to leave. You need a lawyer, not Harold. He's good for estates, but this requires a shark. Someone who can handle municipal law contracts and isn't afraid of Langley's threats. She wrote a name on a card. Joyce Winters. She just won a case against the state over indigenous fishing rights. Langley tried to intimidate her once. She laughed in his face. I took the card. Thank you, Helena, for everything. Don't thank me yet. We haven't won anything. She squeezed my shoulder. But Margaret, Richard would be so proud, and for what it's worth, I think you're going to pull this off. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Richard's death. Purpose. The grief was still there, a constant ache in my chest, but now it had direction. My phone showed 18 missed calls from Daniel, 12 from Clara. I ignored them all. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw both their rental cars still there. Through the kitchen window, I could see them at the table. Papers spread between them. My papers. Richard's papers. They were already trying to carve up our life. I sat in the car for a moment, gathering strength. Helena was right. It was going to get ugly. But Richard had given me more than money. He'd given me a reason to fight. I walked through my own front door like a general entering a battlefield. The war for Richard's legacy was about to begin. The confrontation with Daniel and Clara could wait. First, I needed to see Harold. His office occupied the second floor of a Victorian building overlooking the harbor, the same office where Richard and I had signed our wills, planned our retirement, celebrated small victories over the decades. "Margaret," Harold said, rising as his secretary showed me in, "I expected you yesterday." I had other matters to attend to. I sat down, noting the thick folder already on his desk. Patricia Morse was very helpful. Harold's weathered face creased into a slight smile. Richard knew you'd need time to process, but I'm afraid we don't have much of it." He opened the folder. "There's a condition attached to the Project Haven funds that Richard insisted upon. You have 18 months from the date of his death to break ground on the project." 18 months? My stomach dropped. That's barely enough time to get permits, let alone if construction doesn't begin within that time frame, Harold continued gently. The entire sum transfers to an international medical charity. Richard wanted to ensure the money would do good either way, but he was betting on you to make it happen here. I calculated quickly. October now. That gave me until April of next year to navigate town politics, secure land, finalize plans, and start building. He really thought of everything, I murmured. Not quite everything. Harold's expression darkened. I've had 3 calls from your son this morning. He's asking questions about your finances, trying to determine if there are assets beyond the house and the retirement accounts. He ransacked Richard's study while I was gone. I'm not surprised. Margaret, I need to warn you. Daniel's been making inquiries about having you declared incompetent. He's contacted a psychiatrist who specializes in elder evaluations. The words hit me like cold water. On what grounds? Grief-induced cognitive impairment, sudden personality changes, leaving the house without informing them. It's flimsy, but with the right doctor. Harold shrugged. I've seen adult children succeed with less. What do I do? First, we document everything. Keep a journal of your daily activities, your meetings, your decisions. Show clear thinking and purpose. Second, we need to fast-track some of this project planning. The more concrete progress you make, the harder it becomes to paint you as incompetent. He pulled out another document. Richard also left instructions about the house. It's to remain yours until you choose otherwise, with specific language preventing forced sale for medical or care facilities. He anticipated this. Of course he did, I said, feeling a wave of love for my careful, protective husband. Harold leaned forward. Now, about the shipyard property. Frank Garrison is indeed willing to sell, but there's a complication. Preston Vale, the developer, has been circling that land for 2 years. He wants to build a luxury resort and marina. Vale has deep pockets and deeper connections. The moment he learns you're interested, he'll try to outbid you. What's the asking price? $4 million, but Frank won't sell to Vale at any price. His grandfather built Liberty ships there during World War II. He wants the land to serve the community, not wealthy tourists. Then we need to move quickly. Agreed. I can have purchase documents drawn up by tomorrow. But Margaret, buying the land is just the beginning. The Planning Commission meets monthly. Victor Langley has held the chairmanship for 8 years. He's blocked 3 affordable housing proposals in that time. I thought of the architectural plans, Richard's careful research, the coalition he'd begun building. We'll need public pressure, community support. Exactly, which brings me to the last item. Harold pulled out a flash drive. Richard made a video. He asked me to give this to you when you were ready to fight. His words, not mine. I stared at the small device. Even from beyond the grave, Richard was still guiding me. There's also this. Harold handed me a business card. Joyce Winters. She's expecting your call. Helena already mentioned her. Great minds, Harold said. You'll need her for the municipal battles ahead. I'll handle the estate and property matters. But Joyce is who you want in your corner when facing down Langley and Vale. I stood to leave, then paused. Harold, why didn't Richard tell me? 10 years is a long time to keep such a secret. The old lawyer's eyes softened. He talked about it once, said you'd given the community 40 years of service, always putting others first. He wanted to give you the resources to do what you'd always dreamed of, without the burden of fundraising or begging for grants. He called it your liberation fund. Tears pricked my eyes, and he never got to see it happen. Oh, I think he's seeing it, Harold said quietly, and I think he knew exactly what you'd do with it. I drove to the old shipyard that afternoon. 20 acres of prime waterfront, abandoned since the fishing industry contracted. The buildings were weathered but solid. New England construction built to withstand nor'easters. I could see it already. The health center where the main warehouse stood, apartments rising where the workers' quarters had been, gardens where rusty equipment now littered the ground. Frank Garrison was waiting by the main gate, a solid man in his 70s with hands scarred from decades of boat repair. "Mrs. Whitford," he said, unlocking the chain. "Harold called, said you might be interested in the property." We walked the grounds together. Frank pointed out the deep water access, the solid foundations, the potential for renovation rather than demolition. "Vale wants to tear it all down," he said, spitting into the weeds, "erase the history, build some monstrosity with a spa and yacht club." He looked at me sideways. "Harold says you have different plans." I told him about the health center, the senior housing, the community gardens. His weathered face lit up. "My grandfather would have loved that," he said. "He believed in taking care of workers, fair wages, good conditions. That's what built this place." $4 million is your asking price? For Vale, $10 million wouldn't be enough. For you? He studied me. 3.5, and I'll throw in all the salvageable materials from the existing buildings. Some of that lumber is old-growth pine you can't get anymore. We shook hands there in the shadow of his grandfather's legacy. As I drove home, I knew the easy part was over. Buying land was simple when you had money. Getting permission to build something the powerful didn't want, that was where the real battle would begin. My phone buzzed. "Clara, Mother, where are you? We need to talk about your future." I smiled grimly. Yes, we did need to talk about my future. Just not the future they had in mind. The Planning Commission meeting was scheduled for the first Tuesday in November. I had 3 weeks to prepare, and Victor Langley was already throwing obstacles in my path. "He's requiring 17 different impact studies," Joyce Winters said, spreading documents across her conference table. "Environmental, traffic, economic, archaeological. Half of these aren't even standard requirements." Joyce was everything Helena had promised, sharp, fearless, and utterly unimpressed by small-town power plays. Her silver hair was cut in a severe bob, and her handshake could crack walnuts. "Can he do that?" I asked. "Technically? No. Legally? He'll try. But 2 can play at bureaucracy." She smiled like a shark scenting blood. "I've already filed requests for public records on every development approved in the last 5 years. Want to bet none of them needed 17 studies?" Sarah Blackwood, our permit specialist, looked up from her laptop. "The archaeological survey is particularly ridiculous. That shipyard has been industrial land for over a century. But I know the game. We'll get their studies done in record time." Our team had grown quickly. Along with Helena, Joyce, and Sarah, we'd added James Kowalski, the architect Helena recommended, and Maria Santos from the Hotel Workers Union. Captain Rodriguez from the fishing fleet had signed on as community liaison. "The real issue isn't the paperwork," Helena said. "It's the public pressure. Langley can delay us indefinitely unless we make it politically impossible." "Which is why," Maria announced. "We're holding a community meeting next Thursday. The Union Hall is donated, and I've got commitments from over 200 families to attend." 200? I was stunned. "Margaret, do you know how many of my members commute over an hour because they can't afford to live where they work? This project offers hope." The meeting would be crucial, but first I had to deal with a more immediate threat. Daniel and Clara had summoned, their word, me to a family conference at my own kitchen table. They sat side by side, a united front with manila folders arranged before them like weapons. "Mother," Daniel began in his CEO voice, "we've been patient, but your behavior since Dad's death has become concerning." "My behavior?" "Disappearing without notice, making large financial decisions without consultation, meeting with strangers." Clara's voice dripped false concern. "We're worried about you." "I'm touched," I said dryly. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This isn't a joke. We've spoken with Dr. Pemberton. He specializes in geriatric psychology and agrees that your recent actions could indicate cognitive decline brought on by grief." "You discussed my mental health with a stranger without my consent?" "He's willing to conduct an evaluation," Clara continued as if I hadn't spoken. For your own safety. I looked at my children, really looked at them. When had they become these cold strangers? No, I said simply. Mother, be reasonable. I said no. I'm not submitting to any evaluation, I'm not selling the house, and I'm not moving to a facility. I stood. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting. Daniel stood too, his face flushing. We're trying to help you. No, you're trying to control me. There's a difference. I collected my purse. Your father understood that. Apparently, he failed to teach it to you. The words hung in the air like a slap. I left them sitting there and drove to Joyce's office. We need to accelerate everything, I told her. My children are escalating. Joyce made notes as I described the confrontation. They'll probably file for guardianship, but between your documented activities, your clear decision-making, and the team you've assembled, any competent judge will see through it. She paused. Speaking of documentation, have you watched Richard's video? I'd been carrying the flash drive for days, unable to bring myself to view it. That night, alone in my study. I finally inserted it into my laptop. Richard's face filled the screen. Recorded in this very room. He looked healthy, vital. This must have been made months before his death. Hello, M, he said, using his pet name for me. If you're watching this, then you've discovered Project Haven and probably have a lot of questions. I'm sorry for the secrecy, but I knew you'd try to stop me from working so hard if you knew what I was doing. I've watched you pour your heart into this community for 40 years. I've seen you sketch plans on napkins, write grant proposals that went nowhere, bang your head against the bureaucracy. You deserved better. The community deserved better. So I decided to do something about it. Every side job, every consulting gig, every lucky investment, it all went to this. Not for me, M, for you, for your vision. I know our children won't understand. They've forgotten where they came from. Forgotten that we raised them in a 2-bedroom apartment while I worked the docks and you volunteered at the food bank. They see us as comfortable retirees now and think that's all we ever were. But you and I know better. We know what it's like to choose between medicine and groceries. We know what it's like to watch friends lose homes they worked their whole lives for. Build it, M. Build something that lasts. Build it for everyone who's been told they don't matter because they don't have money. Build it for the kids who need somewhere safe after school. Build it for the seniors choosing between heat and heart medication. And when people try to stop you, and they will, remember that you're the woman who organized the fishing fleet strike of '89, who got the first multilingual health clinic approved, who faced down bigger bullies than Victor Langley and won. I love you. I believe in you. Now go show them what Margaret Whitford is made of. The screen went dark. I sat in the silence, tears streaming down my face. Even in death, Richard was still my champion. A text from Helena interrupted my grief. Opposition forming. Preston Vale just scheduled a meeting with Langley. Word is out. Good, let them come. I opened my laptop and began typing talking points for the community meeting. Richard was right. I'd beaten bigger bullies. But I'd never had $19 million and a team of fighters behind me before. Victor Langley thought he could bury this project in paperwork and delays. He was about to learn what happened when you cornered a grieving widow with nothing left to lose and everything to build. The courthouse was packed for the guardianship hearing. Daniel and Clara sat with their lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Brennan who specialized in elder law. I recognized several faces in the gallery, neighbors, former colleagues, people whose loyalty could apparently be bought with my children's promises. Joyce squeezed my hand. Remember, let them make their case first. Give them all the rope they need. Judge Patricia Hawthorne, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, called the hearing to order. This is a petition for limited financial guardianship filed by Daniel and Clara Whitford regarding their mother. Margaret Whitford, Mr. Brennan. You may proceed. Brennan painted a picture of a grief-stricken widow making impulsive decisions, the sudden secrecy, the large financial commitments, the concerning meetings with opportunistic individuals. Mrs. Whitford has refused psychological evaluation. He concluded, her children simply want to protect her from those who would take advantage of her vulnerable state. Dr. Pemberton testified next, though he admitted he'd never actually met me. Based on the family's descriptions, Mrs. Whitford exhibits classic signs of complicated grief potentially affecting judgment. Your witness, Judge Hawthorne said to Joyce. Joyce stood slowly, like a cat stretching. Dr. Pemberton, how many times have you evaluated Mrs. Whitford? I haven't directly. So your entire opinion is based on hearsay from interested parties who stand to gain financially from this guardianship? I wouldn't characterize it as. Thank you. No further questions. Joyce turned to the judge. Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence of Mrs. Whitford's mental acuity and decision-making capacity. What followed was a parade of witnesses that Joyce and I had carefully orchestrated. Harold testified first, detailing my careful review of all documents, my pointed questions, my clear understanding of the financial implications. Helena came next, describing our strategic planning sessions, my grasp of complex healthcare delivery systems, and the sophisticated coalition I was building. Sarah Blackwood presented the permits and studies I'd commissioned, the work of someone who understands bureaucracy and long-term planning, not someone making impulsive decisions. But it was Captain Rodriguez who may have turned the tide. The old fisherman stood uncomfortably in his one good suit, hat clutched in weathered hands. I've known Margaret Whitford for 30 years, he said in accented English. She helped my crew get health insurance when nobody else cared. She started the food program when the fishing industry collapsed in '08. This project she's planning, it's not some crazy idea. It's what she's always done, just bigger. And what about her children's concerns? Brennan asked on cross-examination. Rodriguez looked directly at Daniel and Clara. I got 5 kids. If any of them tried to steal from me what I worked for while I was still breathing, I'd cut them out of my will faster than you can gut a fish. A ripple of laughter went through the gallery. Judge Hawthorne suppressed a smile. Joyce called me as the final witness. Mrs. Whitford, please describe your recent activities. I detailed everything, discovering Richard's gift, assembling the team, negotiating the land purchase, planning the community meeting. I spoke clearly, presenting financial projections, architectural specifications, and implementation timelines. And why didn't you inform your children? Joyce asked. Because from the moment of their father's funeral, they've treated me as a problem to be managed rather than their mother. They were planning to sell my home and move me to a facility before Richard was even in the ground. I looked at my children. They lost the right to my trust when they decided my grief made me weak rather than determined. Brennan tried to shake me on cross-examination, but I'd spent 40 years in contentious town meetings. I'd faced down worse. Mrs. Whitford, isn't it true you're planning to spend millions on this project? Yes. Money my husband saved specifically for this purpose. Without consulting your family? My husband was my family. He consulted with me through his actions, even if I didn't know it at the time. You don't think your behavior has been erratic? I think my behavior has been focused. There's a difference. Judge Hawthorne called a recess. 20 minutes later, she returned with her decision. I've reviewed the evidence presented. While I understand the petitioner's stated concerns, I find no indication that Mrs. Whitford lacks capacity. On the contrary, she appears to be executing a complex project with skill and determination. The petition for guardianship is denied. She looked at Daniel and Clara. I would also note that attempting to obtain guardianship over a parent who is clearly competent borders on abuse of the legal system. Any further frivolous filings will be met with sanctions. Outside the courthouse, Daniel confronted me. This isn't over, Mother. Yes, it is, I said firmly. You made your choice when you decided I was too old and too female to manage my own life. Dad saw this coming. He warned me. Clara's carefully composed face cracked. We're your children. No, I said, walking past them. You're strangers who happen to share my DNA. Richard was right. Family is the people who support your dreams, not those who try to steal them. Joyce caught up with me at my car. That was beautiful, but they'll be at the community meeting tomorrow night. They'll try to undermine you. Let them, I said. The community knows who's really on their side. That evening, I stood in the empty Union Hall, arranging chairs with Maria and her volunteers. Tomorrow, this room would be full of people who needed what Richard and I planned to build. My phone buzzed, an unknown number, but I recognized Victor Langley's voice immediately. Mrs. Whitford, I think we should meet privately before tomorrow's circus. I'm sure we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. No, thank you. Mr. Langley, I prefer transparency. That's unfortunate. Preston Vale is very interested in that shipyard property. He has deep pockets and long memories. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Good evening. Mrs. Whitford. I hung up and went back to arranging chairs. Langley and Vale thought money and power were everything. Tomorrow night, I'd show them what community really meant. The morning of the Planning Commission meeting, I woke to find my mailbox stuffed with anonymous letters. Stop the ghetto housing. Don't ruin our property values. Go back to your knitting, old woman. I added them to the growing file Joyce was keeping. Preston Vale's fingerprints were all over this campaign, even if we couldn't prove it yet. The meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. at Town Hall. By 6:30, the chamber was overflowing. Our supporters filled most seats. Fishing families, hotel workers, elderly residents, young teachers who couldn't afford apartments. But Vale's people were there too, identifiable by their coordinated signs. Protect our community and smart development, not handouts. Victor Langley gavelled the meeting to order, his thin lips curved in what he probably thought was a smile. We're here to consider the preliminary proposal for the Haven Community Health and Housing Complex. Mrs. Whitford, you have 20 minutes. 20 minutes to present a life-changing project. I'd given shorter speeches with bigger impact. I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces. Daniel and Clara sat in the back, arms crossed. Preston Vale lounged in the front row, designer suit impeccable, checking his phone with studied indifference. Good evening, I began. My name is Margaret Whitford. My husband Richard and I have lived in this community for 42 years. We raised our children here, paid taxes here, volunteered here, and for the last 10 years of his life, my husband worked secretly on a gift for all of you. I clicked the remote. The first slide showed the architectural rendering. Beautiful, practical, filled with light and life. The Haven Complex will provide primary health care, dental services, mental health counseling, and a pharmacy with sliding scale payments. No one will be turned away for inability to pay. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I clicked again. 48 units of affordable senior housing with priority given to long-time residents, rents capped at 30% of income, community gardens, a playground, all built to the highest environmental standards. Who's paying for this? Nah, someone shouted from Vale's section. I am, I said simply, with money my husband saved for exactly this purpose. I turned to the commission. Mr. Langley requested 17 different studies. We've completed them all. Sarah stood, holding the thick binder. Environmental impact minimal, traffic, actually reduced due to proximity to services. Economic impact, over 200 permanent jobs created. Helena took the microphone next, presenting health statistics. 1 in 3 seniors choosing between medication and food, children with untreated dental pain missing school, preventable conditions becoming emergencies because people couldn't afford regular care. This isn't charity, she said firmly. It's community investment. Healthy people work better, learn better, live better. Then came our masterstroke. Captain Rodriguez led a procession of supporters to the microphone. For 30 minutes, they testified. A fisherman's wife who'd lost teeth because she couldn't afford a dentist, a teacher living in her car, an elderly couple facing eviction from their home of 50 years. A Mrs. Whitford isn't giving us handouts, Maria Santos said, her hotel uniform still crisp after a 10-hour shift. She's giving us dignity. But Vale had prepared too. His parade of opposition began with a real estate agent worrying about property values, a boutique owner claiming increased traffic would hurt business, anonymous residents concerned about changing neighborhood character. Then Daniel stood. My heart clenched. "The commission should know," he said smoothly, "that my mother is recently widowed and making emotional decisions with family money. My sister and I have serious concerns about her mental state and the influence certain parties may be exerting." Gasps echoed through the chamber. Using the guardianship loss to publicly humiliate me, even I hadn't thought he'd sink that low. Clara followed. "We love our mother, but she's not thinking clearly. This money could provide for her care as she ages. Instead, she's being manipulated into grandiose schemes." I felt Joyce's hand on my arm, steadying me, but I didn't need steadying. I was furious. When public comment ended, Langley smiled coldly. "Thank you all. The commission will now deliberate." "I invoke my right of rebuttal," I said, standing. "That's unusual," Langley said. "So is having my own children publicly question my sanity?" I shot back. "I have that right, Mr. Langley, unless you'd like to violate procedure in front of the press." 3 reporters scribbled notes. Langley nodded tightly. I returned to the podium and pulled out Richard's letter. My hands didn't shake. "My husband wrote this, knowing our children would react exactly as they have." I read it aloud, every word. The room was silent as Richard's voice, through me, filled the space. When I reached the part about Daniel and Clara forgetting where they came from, I looked directly at them. "You were born in the charity ward of County Hospital because we couldn't afford anything else. Your father worked 3 jobs so you could go to college without debt. And now you sit there in your expensive clothes and call me crazy for wanting to help families like we used to be." I folded the letter. "Commissioners, you have a choice. Stand with Preston Vale and developers who see our community as dollars to extract, or stand with the people who make this town work, who teach your children, who catch your fish, who clean your hotels, who deserve to live with dignity in the place they call home." My husband kept this secret for 10 years because he knew powerful people would try to stop it. Well, here we are. The question is, will you let them? The silence stretched. Then Maria Santos began clapping. Others joined. Soon the chamber thundered with applause. Langley gavelled frantically, "Order, order!" Commissioner Walsh, the youngest member, leaned into his microphone. I moved to approve the preliminary proposal and fast-track permitting. "Second," said Commissioner Chen immediately. Langley's face flushed. "We need to discuss—" "We've discussed enough," Walsh said. "I call the question." The vote was 3-2, with Langley and his ally Peterson dissenting. The room erupted. People hugged, cried, cheered. Vale stalked out, already on his phone. Daniel and Clara slipped away like shadows. Joyce grinned at me. "Round 1 to the widow." But I knew better. This was just the beginning. Vale wouldn't accept defeat. Langley would find new obstacles. My children would regroup. "Get ready," I told my team. "They're going to come at us with everything now." Helena hugged me. "Then it's a good thing you've got everything to fight back with." As I left town hall, I touched Richard's letter in my pocket. He'd known this night would come, had planned for it. I just wished he could have seen their faces when love and community beat money and power. At least for tonight. The construction site hummed with purposeful activity on a bright March morning. I stood on the platform we'd erected for the groundbreaking ceremony, looking out at a crowd that had swelled far beyond our expectations. 5 months of battles had led to this moment. Preston Vale had tried everything: anonymous complaints to state regulators, frivolous lawsuits challenging our permits, a smear campaign painting me as a senile woman being exploited by radical activists. But for every attack, our coalition had grown stronger. The investigation Joyce initiated had revealed years of Langley's corruption, bribes disguised as consulting fees, permits fast-tracked for friends, applications buried for enemies. He'd resigned in disgrace 2 weeks ago, with criminal charges pending. 5 minutes, Mrs. Whitford, Sarah called out. She'd become more than our permit specialist. She was now project director, overseeing every detail with military precision. I surveyed the crowd gathering below. The fishing families were there in force, American flags and Union banners waving. Hotel workers had coordinated their shifts to attend. Teachers brought students to witness history. The high school band was warming up, their drums echoing across the harbor. Helena appeared at my elbow, beaming. The medical school confirmed this morning they'll provide rotating staff for the clinic, full accreditation. Richard would be so proud, I murmured. He is proud, she corrected gently. Near the back of the crowd, I spotted two familiar figures standing apart. Daniel and Clara had aged visibly in these 5 months. Their final attempt to block the project, a last-ditch appeal claiming the land sale was invalid, had failed spectacularly when Frank Garrison testified about their attempted bribe to withdraw his sale agreement. They hadn't spoken to me since. Joyce climbed the platform stairs, grinning like a Cheshire cat. Vail just withdrew his competing development proposal. Word is, his investors pulled out after the Langley scandal broke. He's leaving town. Good riddance, Maria Santos said, joining us. She wore a hard hat decorated with union stickers. My members are ready to work. Local jobs for local people, just like you promised. The ceremony began at 11 a.m. sharp. Reverend Jackson offered a blessing that brought tears to many eyes. The high school choir sang America the Beautiful. Captain Rodriguez, chosen by acclamation to represent the community, spoke simply but powerfully about hope returning to forgotten people. Then it was my turn. 10 years ago, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. My husband Richard started saving money in secret, not for a yacht or a vacation home, but for this moment, for all of you. I looked out at the faces, weathered fishermen, tired hotel maids, young families, elderly couples, my people, Richard's people. They tried to stop us. They called us naive, said affordable housing would ruin the town, claimed health care for all was socialism. They tried to have me declared incompetent, tried to steal this money, tried to bury us in lawsuits and lies. My voice grew stronger, but Richard knew something they didn't. He knew that a community's strength isn't in its property values or its boutique shops. It's in its people. It's in making sure the man who fixes your boat can afford to live near the harbor. It's in knowing the woman who teaches your children doesn't sleep in her car. It's in understanding that health care isn't a privilege. It's a right. The crowd erupted in cheers. I waited for quiet. Well, this isn't my victory. It's ours. Every person who testified, who wrote letters, who stood up to power. You built this. Richard just provided the funds. I just carried the torch. But you are the light. I picked up the ceremonial shovel, its handle wrapped in ribbon. So let's build something beautiful. Let's build something lasting. Let's build it together. The blade bit into earth as cameras flashed and the crowd roared. The band struck up a victory march. People hugged and cried and laughed. Through the celebration, I noticed Daniel approaching slowly, Clara behind him. They looked uncertain, diminished. I stepped down from the platform to meet them. Mother, Daniel said quietly, I wanted to say, you were wrong, Clara finished, about everything, about you. I studied my children, really looked at them for perhaps the first time in months. They seemed younger somehow, stripped of their arrogance. Dad would have hated what we did, Daniel continued. We found his other letters, the ones he wrote to us but never sent, about disappointment, about losing our way. He loved you both, I said carefully. He just wanted you to remember who you are, where you came from. Could we, Clara's voice broke, could we help somehow with the project? I considered their request. Forgiveness was one thing, trust was another. The construction crew needs volunteers for non-skilled work. Habitat for Humanity is managing that component. I pulled out a card. Call this number. Start there. They nodded. understanding, redemption, like Rome, wasn't built in a day. As they walked away, Helena appeared beside me again. Think they're sincere? I think they're beginning to be, I said. Richard always believed people could change, even our children. The groundbreaking party continued for hours. Food trucks arrived, donated by local restaurants. The band played on. Children chased each other between the surveyor's stakes marking future buildings. As the sun began to set, painting the harbor in shades of gold and rose, I found myself alone for a moment by the cornerstone we'd laid. Richard's name was carved there, along with the dedication, for those who serve, those who struggle, and those who hope. We did it, my love, I whispered to the wind. We actually did it. Sarah found me there. The contractors want to review tomorrow's schedule, and the healthcare board needs your input on equipment purchases. And it can all wait until morning, Joyce interrupted, appearing with Helena and Maria. Tonight, we celebrate. I looked at these women who'd become my sisters in arms, then back at the crowd still celebrating on the land where healing would happen, where homes would rise, where community would flourish. You know what Richard used to say? I asked them. He'd say the best revenge against those who try to diminish you is to build something they could never imagine. Maria raised her water bottle in a toast. To Richard Whitford, who imagined. To Margaret Whitford, Helena added, who built. To all of us, Joyce continued, who fought. To the community, I finished, who deserved it. We stood there as darkness fell, construction lights beginning to illuminate what would rise from this ground in 18 months. This would be a place of healing and hope. But tonight, it was already something more. It was proof that love is stronger than greed, that community can defeat corruption, that an old woman with a young woman's dreams and a dead man's fortune could change everything. Somewhere I knew. Richard was smiling. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from today. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your thoughts about Margaret's journey. What would you have done in her place?